of being human.
In its origin, a poem is something completely unequivocal. It is a discharge, a call, a cry, a sigh, a gesture, a reaction by which the living soul seeks to defend itself from or to become aware of an emotion and experience. In this first, most spontaneous, most important function, no poem can be judged. It speaks, first of all, simply to the poet himself. It is his cry, his scream, his dream, his smile, his whirling fists. Herman Hesse.
So funny that we should both be reading Hesse in these last couple of weeks without having spoken to each other about it. And in fact, the first book I read about Hesse was this summer, called Wanderings and Notes, I think in English, which was given to me by my brother-in-law, who had bought it on holiday, and he said, "I think you would love it." And my brother-in-law, incidentally, also the man who provided the art in the background of both of us, because we have both procured a piece of art by him, because he's an amateur artist and we very much appreciate what he's doing. Mm-hmm. And I also, Sylvain is his name, a French name for a Dutchman. He comes from the south of the Netherlands. And he gave me he gave me the book because he said there's short stories and of his wandering from his home county in Germany to the south of Switzerland, where he ended up. Hesse ended up living there for the rest of his life. And yet, great foresight. He was worried about the developments in Germany. And he was born in, I think, 1877. He'd lived through the First World War, and he didn't somehow trust it. He left Switzerland, and of course, it's an incredible foresight of what had happened. One of his best friends was a public official who stayed in Germany and never accepted the Nazi regime and went through terrible suffering because, of course, and poverty especially, because as a public official who wasn't collaborating, they made life very hard. And that's probably when you were lucky, if they just made life hard on you and not got rid of you. And Hesse felt guilty about that for having left at the same time. And he said, I tried to do what I could do from here, but I wasn't in the thick of it. And then thinking about what you write as the poet, that it cannot be judged, And I think there's also, when you're writing something, you don't really care about what other people think of it. That's for them to do their thinking and have their feelings about it, but it's got nothing to do with you as a poet, I think.
Yeah, I'd agree, Jake. It resonates with me, I heard myself say I agree. But more that it resonates, that it's not results, it's not a results orientated business. Creation. And it's curious, this week, while we're recording this episode, of course, we've recorded other episodes and they've gone out, and we've been with, the putting out live of an episode and what that's like, but all our commitment is to, this is our poetry. This is our mark. This is our whirling fists, and it's that commitment to, I think we're all the time trying to speak something, isn't it? And so when I read that, because then you and I began to talk about this, about Hesse. Is it Hesse or?
In Dutch, I would say Hesse because we speak some German, but that's probably Hesse in English.
Yeah, and where when I read that piece, which is from a book, actually, it's not one of his books. It's from a book called Poetic Medicine, The Healing Art of Poem Making by John Fox. And I was so struck by it and what he was saying. And just inside me, I was thinking about the extraordinary human need to make our mark. And sometimes maybe we think we make our mark in the world. I've got to make my mark on the world, as opposed to letting the world make its mark on me. I am the mark of the world. I'm thinking about, I was saying this morning about cavemen and women and these drawings. These, like, who have we been drawing to? Who do we write to? And the other thing is, as I was just wandering up the stairs this morning, then something else came to me from an Irish poet, Brendan Kennelly, and he says something like, he said, it's necessary at every level to utter oneself. And I was thinking about that, how that stands right alongside, I believe, what Hesse is saying. You know, that it's the scream, it's the, and what is it in us that wants to communicate something of that which is almost incommunicable? You know, which you and I maybe probably would say mystery or God or the divine, and yet there's something about, you know, Sylvain's art, and you know, it's, when I saw it and you showed it to me, I was like, and then, you know, because he sent me a piece, I think I shared with you, he sent me a piece that's here on my desk, a letter with the piece of art, and just so touched me. Because I see this as his mark. He's whirling fists.
Yeah. I wonder if it's because we it makes us feel less alone. Because if I do some shouting, there's a chance that somebody might hear me. Right. And
yeah. I just, like, even at this moment, Jake, when you said that, you know, I inside myself, I felt so relieved. And more than relieved, it was also, oh, Jake, he is hearing what I'm saying. You know, it's like, oh yeah, that's it. Like, it's on, oh yeah, feel less alone. So when you being able to say that to me, I was like, oh yeah, of course.
Yeah, I was recently having coffee with a German hermit, female hermit, who used to live on the Isle of Wight. She taught ethics in medicine in Edinburgh, I think, for a while, and then moved to the Isle of Wight at some point to become a hermit. And I moved her to Germany because she needed support. She's nearly 80. She needed a little bit of support, as you can imagine. And so we loaded up a little van. But we were having coffee one morning, and she was very distressed that morning. Somehow, you know, we all wake up sometimes distressed, and she was clearly distressed and needed to talk. And once every 2 months, she permitted herself as a hermit to have a cup of coffee with us. And then she'd like talk for Britain and Germany together, probably the whole of the European Union. But she'd say, we all die alone. And she was very upset about that. We all die alone. We're all very alone. And I had difficulty connecting to that because my spirit was much lighter that day. And I said, yeah, but we have God. Yes, but in the end we're alone. And I thought, wow, right, as a religious to have that experience. But I think because we don't know if God is there, right? That's so that's why we're crying out from the depths, oh Lord, hear my voice. It's because you only have to cry out because you're not sure, because you know, you wouldn't even have to speak if you knew for sure. You could just think it, and the divine presence would know it, I imagine.
Just as I'm listening to you, I'm aware of a memory from about 12 minutes, 12, 13, I'm being very precise here, 12, 13 minutes ago, I'm just looking at the clock. It could have been longer, and I was walking up the stairs, and I had a very similar thought that you've just shared now, like about creating, and the thought wasn't necessarily about being alone, but it was like, how do I know? How do I actually know? You know, and what your friend said about being alone. And yet something in us knows. I believe in that creative place. You know, sometimes I'll write something. I was thinking about a poem that I wrote lately, and I was thinking, like, if somebody said to me, what was your thinking behind that? And there was no thinking behind it, because the lines make no sense, at least not in a literal, you know. There's a communicating of something. I think it's a communication of the yearning, of the reaching out. And I was just, so as I was walking, I was listening. She was like, oh yeah, that's kind of what I was with. It's part of why I believe, for me anyway, it's part of why I commit and consent to sitting every week. Because I'm often trying to articulate what doesn't have any words. And it doesn't stop me. Stop even trying to find words.
Yeah. And how it's received on the other side is not under your control, right? And so it can still be meaningful, even though it's not the interpretation that you have when writing the words, whether you felt sometimes there was no coherence, and sometimes I'm sure you write something that feels very coherent, but the recipient will do something with that.
Yeah.
And many people will have different interpretations of the same thing, and they're all valid experiences, right? Because they're their experiences.
Yeah.
And it's this desire to make a contribution to that exchange, to other people hearing. Or perhaps I often feel when I'm writing pieces, I'm hoping that they think, oh, I recognize that too.
Yeah.
Right? Kind of like a question, do you have that too? It's a typical opening of a column in a newspaper, but it is kind of like, do you have that too? Say, oh, yeah, I have that too.
Because there's such a comfort in that, Jake, isn't it? That's the word that's coming to me right now when you were listening to me. So I think it's the need not to feel alone, you know, and I can't remember. So it was like a comfort I could feel in me when, Jake gets what I'm saying. And it's like it's part of the crack of hanging out, you know what I mean? It could be, you know, let's say in Ireland, rummaging away, going on about something, and Jake goes, you know, you go from a, you know, different culture, different country, you go, is that, yeah, you know, and I've been taking, you know, 10, 15 minutes to articulate something. There's something just, you know, so beautiful about that, because I believe lots of us have a feeling of the absolute pain of the aloneness. Like I'm thinking about what Moriarty says, you know, where he says, loneliness is the pain of being alone. Solitude is the glory of being alone. And curiously, this week, we were talking about, you and I were talking about also, we were talking about introversion and meeting people and connection. And I think you had shared with me the right to share as I do this. No, we can always edit it afterwards, as you reminded me later. You were saying about your own increasing need for solitude.
Yes. And you know, the becoming more comfortable with it is a process, and as you become more comfortable with it, the need also increases, because it becomes pleasant to be alone. Yeah. I can very well remember not wanting to be alone, and any distraction from being alone was welcome. You know, I'd barely ever be alone in my room. I'd just go out and find something to do or meet someone. That's a developing motion. And also to be better in company, I need more solitude.
Yeah. It's such that that what you share, to be better in company, I need more solitude. I would know for me that if I so at my unhealthiness, it's my it'll take me away into too much time on my own, too much time alone. I could look back at that and could see that. But I know that it's healthiest. It calibrates me in a particular way to be in the world.
Yeah.
But not on the world. And certainly to be in the world. And so when I sit in the morning, like many of us sit, or, whoever practices of silence or solitude or contemplation, because I know that I'm better resourced and I'm better, probably more responsive as opposed to reactive.
Yes.
Even though I still have plenty of reaction. He's actually quite a nuclear reaction. You know what I mean? Because I suppose that's, it's just really helpful, isn't it, to take that time to spend on our own, so that we can be in the world. Like I'm thinking about Pascal, isn't it? Says that all of the evil in the world results from man's inability to sit quietly alone with himself in a room.
Oh. Yeah, and I'm thinking about at least for perhaps also for introverts, but certainly for extroverts. I think the time alone to be of better, to make the contact with others of better quality, is kind of to create more of an intentionality around the way that we engage, or a different acting with more awareness in the engagement, more compassionately, more at service to what the circumstances require. Mm-hmm. And I can't speak for all extroverts, but I often feel that I've rushed past many things because I didn't take that time. I wasn't able to take it. I was too uncomfortable to take that time, so I didn't even enter into it. And maybe it's just a natural aging process that you become somewhat cognizant of that requirement.
Perhaps, I mean, I say, I suppose, as men in our 50s, there's more of my life lived than I have left. I'm thinking about somebody I know and love that says to me, that's very depressing. I said, I find that for me, I find that very liberating. I'm thinking back to what you were saying, Jake, about, I can't quite recall all of the words of how you communicated it just now, but, about making a contribution.
Mm.
I think you didn't say what, but how do I, what's mine to do?
Yeah.
And I think back to, so when we read something like Hesse or, Pascal, they speak to something of our condition, even though, or even further back, even though that they could be 50 years from us, 100 years from us, 600 years from us, 2,000 years from us. And we say, I recognize that. I recognize me.
Yeah. 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 The contribution or the service, I think, is that no one expects gratitude from the world for the stuff that they've taken out. And so when people become extremely successful and they've enriched themselves to a large extent, maybe by making a good product or something, right? But at the end, usually the movement is that the women and men want to then start charities. Now, why would that be? Right? And of course, if you're very rich, you can make that movement.
Yeah.
But it is interesting. And it's difficult to find meaning to the things that I've taken out. Like I've really taken advantage of this world. Okay, great. You've materially done well, and it's satisfied you in many ways. But does it leave you filled? And that I'm not so sure about. I'm actually, maybe I am sure about it, but maybe there are people. That's why I'm saying I'm not sure about it. No, I'm not so sure about it. You can really believe that is has been a fulfilling practice per se. I mean, just alone. Maybe it's a good thing to do, but can you complement it with something that goes beyond that?
I'm just, so curious as I listen to you and thinking about him, and often can happens in, where there's a real dialogue, and I find myself wondering about legacy, and, so people having, as you said, maybe taking things from the world, and of course, like lots of times people are very successful with, there's employment, there's lots of good things that can happen, but then this movement to wanting to give something back. And when does it become less about me? I say that about myself. I was reading something about Meister Eckhart, who's a 13th century German Dominican mystic. People might be listening and saying, "God, that's not much crack, Noel. I must ring you up. We must head out on a night out." But actually, what's extraordinary is he's speaking across time to this time and place, and he talks about ridding the me of me. So that, because I'm thinking about what you're sharing about, Jake, about the movement and the wanting to give back, because that's what community is. I both receive and give. It's always that movement. It's what friendship is about. It's what relationship is about. With true communion, I think another Dominican, Don O'Shea, I think he writes in his book, one of his books, I think it might be called A Holy Mass. True communion is giving and receiving. And I remember reading it, as somebody who's raised Catholic. I was thinking, how did I miss this about communion? So all of the time that I received communion, I had no idea what this whole ritual was about. And I also feel, like as a laugh, I also feel inside myself right now, God, the real loss of that. What was lost?
I don't know. I think couldn't it just be God's joke?
Yeah.
And not because he's messing with us, but to me it feels a little bit a spiritual journey is a peeling off of layers. So when you're 27 and you think you know quite a bit, and then you find out when you're 28 that actually what you were thinking was rather foolish, right? And so now I'm much more reticent in what I think I know, because tomorrow I'll probably think, "Oh, you fool! You shouldn't have told the whole world that was your steadfast belief and truth," because it's an infinite path that we see, right? And you see that with age, it's actually not about how clever we are; it's just how old you can get, right? So you see that in the great artists. Beethoven had a more advanced way of working than Mozart. He had far more phases because he turned much older. So Mozart died while he was still looking for recognition from the world. Beethoven was writing it for himself, and he was experimenting with higher forms that are difficult for us to understand. But he was looking at innovation in music, right? But it just came with age. If Beethoven had died in his late 30s, he wouldn't have done that either.
Yeah, I really like how you frame that. And I'm struck by even the dialogue that we're having here this morning. That something in me is moving, and and kind of, as opposed to these fixed points. I'm thinking as I listen to you about Beethoven, Mozart, like. One of the reflections on the Buddha and Jesus was that when Jesus lived till he was 33, Buddha lived for 40 years after his enlightenment. So there's this whole body of the kind of almost the how-to that was developed simply because he lived 40 years, and it makes sense, isn't it? And how age matures us, hopefully, and that the spiritual journey, as you said, is, I think, again, let's lean into Meister Eckhart. He'd have been great crack on a night out if I could have remembered, if I could have come across him in my 20s. But he says, we don't reach God by addition, we meet God by subtraction. So I'm thinking about, again, Hesse and all of our, whatever we're engaged in, where we're wanting to make our mark, we're stripping away, chiseling away, and the place of solitude that supports us, as you said, to be responsive. What does this situation need or, ask of me? And yeah.
And Hesse was a great bridge between the Buddhist and the Christian tradition, because he was a seminarian who quit and then wrote a famous book called Siddhartha.
That's right.
Explaining the enlightenment process in a way. So it's but you see this the personal privilege of the privilege of the personal journey, right? So I was talking to I meet lots of religions, which will become clear by now to the listener. But I was sitting with the abbot of the local monastery, and we read a text. I think it was the first letter of John, and in the sharing on the text, he said, "I'd never realized this before." He'd been a monk for 40 years. Now, is that a problem, or is it a gift? This is ever giving sacred scripture, and also our own evolving insights. And because of the group dialogue that we had, he was able to see something he hadn't been able to see before. And for that, we have to try to not be alone, right? To do some things together where we receive from others who maybe innocently say something, and you are inspired to see something new.
Yeah, dusting off, cleaning off.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, what about a short break? Welcome back to The Hinge with Noel and Jake. Please support us by following the Hinge podcast on Patreon, YouTube, and Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
So you were talking about the Moriarty earlier. Loneliness is the pain of being alone. Solitude is the glory of being alone. And I thought that was very, very helpful, because it is like that for me.
Yeah, I was. Yeah, I remember when I read that. I'm glad it was helpful, Jake. And I remember when I read that even though I didn't quite understand what he was saying, some part of me understood what he was saying. And for those who that probably hear me and you, Jake, probably, because I've spoken about him a good bit, and he was an Irish poet, philosopher, and he was a teacher at one stage and relocated back to Ireland. He ended up teaching in Canada, and he said, if I don't walk to China backwards, I think I'm going to go mad. And he was talking about part of what John was talking about was being in Canada, and he said, in this vast wilderness, and he says, he was talking about solitude and our need to find solitude. Like somebody else says that solitude is the healthy embodiment of loneliness.
Yes.
And I think it is befriending that place, for me, as I understand it, it's befriending that place in me in which God already knows. He's already waiting. He or she is already waiting, already there.
Yes.
He's waiting for me to recognize. And as I say that, I notice in my body the softening that's happening in my body, almost the mist-like quality that's happening in my body. And the like we were talking just during the break there, the relief. So like an oral conversation where you say something and however imperfect our listening or quality of our presence, somebody says, oh yeah, I too.
Yeah.
And I think it's an enormous need, because the other thing Moriarty goes on to say in that particular clip, and of course we had also referenced him lately, hadn't we, about society and the docility of people. And, where he said, you're in real trouble in life if you're beyond the place where anybody can understand you.
Yeah.
And that makes a lot of sense to me, because sometimes, as in our friendship or with other friends who would have a similar kind of bent, that we would have similar orientation, the comfort of being in community where there's a place beyond words.
Mm.
And even in the words, is it? I know what he's talking about. I know what she's talking about.
Yeah. And do you think when you're in a place beyond being understood, that it's possible to come back? Or
Yes.
As a psychotherapist, could you imagine supporting people doing that?
I think the more I go on in therapy, the more I notice, and of course it's been, you talk about age and the change in me. I think it's presence.
Mm.
It's presence. So at one level you might kind of think, oh, it's some other ethereal place, but actually it's here, it's now. And it's connected, I believe, to what you're saying about, like you had a way of saying it early on today about, like, what does this situation, or what's the response or the contribution? Because in presence, like, I think one of the dangers that can be for us all, for I can certainly speak for myself, is we can think those moments, like what I think Wilbur would talk about, peak moments of experience or states, and they can become very seductive spiritually. That's not where I don't believe that's, like, we can get the ego, the unhealthy part of us can get, oh, let's go after them.
Yeah, to start chasing the peak moment. Yeah. And then it becomes about you.
Yeah.
Which is typically what the ego does. Whereas
I think in that place, as you said, is it possible to the way you said it, Jake, to be in that place and to come back? I think I think it's a returning to what's been there since time immemorial.
Mm.
I believe. And in that place, my life has changed. Because I'm no longer self-absorbed. I've moved beyond ideas of my identity, of my history, of my culture, of my privilege. I'm simply a human being amongst many. It's what Milosev's poem, I think, one of the lines he says, love means to look at yourself the way one looks. Love means to look at yourself the way one looks at, I think it might be distant things. For you are one thing amongst the many. Whereas if I think about myself, like, who are you? Like, so you meet somebody, who are you? Well, like, I'm a social worker, part of my background. I remember one time meeting somebody in the school reunion, and they said to me, did I hear you were teaching? Real Cork, West Cork, teaching Trinity, you. It's like, how in God's name would a man like you that was, drinking so much at some stage ended up in this fight? And I remember thinking at the moment, I wasn't a bit offended. And actually, that individual, a gorgeous individual, I was kind of thinking, Do you know the reality? They're only people.
Yes.
There's nothing like that. It's a grand place. I got a great education there. I met great people there, great classmates, great. And teaching there, great colleagues. But don't get caught up in, because I mean, I notice inside me, I almost feel like holding myself back, Jake, because it's like, oh no, but it's my excitement for, because it's a deliberation, I believe, is what solitude ultimately brings us to. Like it's the essence of a profound spirituality. It's an inner and outer freedom. It will deconstruct your ideas about yourself.
Yeah.
And including like in therapy, I think, where it can be very disruptive, because all of us can get very attached even to our histories. Yeah. And what histories have happened. And it's important not to be a hostage to your history.
Yes. And I'm often reminded of that by certain narratives that keep on sticking with me, and then the confrontation that I had in the past that are not even a memory to the other, but they're still part of my narrative. And maybe they're just still trying to tell me something or teach me something. But there was a story about 2 monks who met a beautiful woman, and she needed to get across the river. And she's pleaded. She said, "I need to get to my family with the food that I've got for my children, and I can't get across. Could you please help me across the river?" And one of the monks says, "I will." And he puts her on his shoulders, this beautiful woman, and carries her across the water and takes her off her shoulders and says goodbye. And he comes back to the other side. The other monks say, "Oh, you shouldn't have done that, and you're a monk, and you shouldn't be touching women." And the monk says, "Maybe I shouldn't have, but you are still carrying her."
Yeah. That's such a beautiful story, Jake, isn't it?
Yeah.
I believe. Yeah.
And I heard it this week, and I was very struck by it because, of course, you're struck because there's a big personal relevance. I'm like, what am I dragging along that I should really let go of now by now,
Yeah, that's so true, isn't it? I think about I think in this moment, and of course, when I talk about the work and that I do, or maybe you talk about the work, did you never identify anybody? Never do that to anybody. That would be a violence. But I'm thinking about, of course, my experiences from farmed and sitting with people. And I remember years ago, like a lot of years ago, when I was doing my psychotherapy training, and I was sitting with someone, and they had something very painful that happened to them. And they were almost the very first person I sat with I really wasn't quite sure what I was about. I had very good mentors. I had a couple of really quality mentors around me, 2 people in particular I'm thinking of in this moment. And they said to me, the individual said to me, maybe we were 16 sessions in or something like that, which I thought was kind of relatively short. They said to me something like, I realized that, or I think I'm ready to kind of work towards an end. Because she says, I realized that this thing I've been carrying has been like a bag of heavy coal around my shoulders. And this has helped me to let go. I don't think I had the maturity, Jake, at the time to understand it. But I think of that person in this moment, and I hope they're doing great.
Yeah.
Because in that moment, she and I were not alone.
Yeah, that's it. We're not alone. Yeah, and it's a contemplative moment in itself, in and of itself, right?
Yeah.
It's the resting in God, or God presented himself as for me as an experience. I find often in the time alone, in solitude, very quickly the relativity is visible. So I'm all worked up, I'm angry, feeling sorry for myself. I don't know what I'm doing, all the embarrassing stuff I don't care to share with anyone. And then you sit, you close your eyes, you take a couple of deep breaths, you try to relax it, and then, what are you doing? And I think that's the loving voice of God. It's not mine. It's like, come off it, let it go. It's not important. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
What? It didn't matter.
Yeah.
But taking the time to diffuse it, or to take the tension off, we need to have the presence of mind to give ourselves the space for contemplation.
Yeah. I believe it's an extraordinary gift. And I was listening to Jake. I was just reminded, and we'd spoken about it briefly, because you had been away for a period of time lately, and so you had quite a lot of time in solitude, actually, hadn't you?
Yeah, and I had time for solitude, and it's interesting to notice yourself how busy you can get organizing your house, doing the shopping, starting to frantically trying to write something. And then when you finally sit down and you close your eyes, the neighbors send a message saying, "You've been alone all week. Would you like to come for a drink?" A wonderful, also very wonderful for people to know that people are looking out for you, even though you don't feel you need it. I couldn't have said no. For me, it would have been uncomfortable for me, because it was so kind. I wanted to respond to the kindness. But it was good to have space to be in an apartment alone in a town where you don't know anyone, and where you just quietly go about your business. And some of it was also the solitude of just moving in a space where no one knew you, because you're invisible. So wherever you sit down, if you go to a bar and you take a cup of coffee and then you walk home to do some writing, it is like you're in a bubble of aloneness, which I found quite pleasant. So you're looking at somebody else's world from the outside a little bit. I thought it was an interesting experience, and I liked because I was in southern Italy, and there was mass at church every day, and I thought, wow, it's amazing that you can actually go to a church and there's one open. But of course, after three visits, 4 old ladies ganged up on me, they wanted to know everything about me. Where are you from? Where are you staying? Are you Are you coming to live here? And I had to explain everything. They didn't hide their curiosity in any way. They were super overexcited, and they welcomed me heartily, and they looked forward to seeing me the next day.
But isn't that, it's like the beautiful, as I listened to, people who were worried about you being alone, and that they'd come, that kindness, as you were saying, just touched me as I was listening to it. Also going to the church, and people, just wanting you to be, welcome you to the community.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I believe that that's what solitude really supports a lot of us to do, is actually to be in community, to be in the great community. And I think that's when we read people then, whether they're Hesse or whoever we read, and it can go, yeah, I belong.
Yeah.
Part of this great, experience, condition of being human. And I have, as you said, I'm thinking about what you're saying about the relativity. You sit down and all of this stuff is going on. Thinking about Thomas Keating's, another monk, and he's got a book called The Human Condition. And Phil, a friend of mine, introduced me to Phil, and to this. And it's just it's a short book. It's like your book, Jake. It's really short, and you're reading it, and you just recognize yourself in it. Or just our human condition. And I would have found, and I find sitting with people that unless there is some contemplative practice, some, or mindfulness practice, therapy is much less effective.
Mm.
It's too heady. It doesn't reach people deeply enough. That's not therapy is helpful. I want to say that, healing, but I think it really promotes a sense of healing, because my experience is sitting with people then at depth, they're often finding language, and even where they would not consider themselves religious, or they start saying very religious things.
Yeah, interesting.
A bit like my own journey.
Yeah, and in times of adversity, we seem more open to the possibility of God. It seems to me, you see this often with death, unexpected death. People become more open. And talking about sitting with people in silence and offering solitude as part of the practice, I often find in the coaching, and I wonder how you experience this. It's a very vulnerable space. Some people I don't feel comfortable doing it because I think it's too much for them. Not because they're uncomfortable with being silent, but with the experience of emotions that will follow as a consequence. I can't do this in the first 2-3 meetings because it's not safe enough yet to be with me because I'm a stranger, and so to be held by me. When all that happens to you, it takes a little bit of time before you can ease people into it, I feel. And some people are very ready from the start, but some people you think, oh, no, I can't do that.
Yeah, I wonder. I would also have that experience, Jake, that I would be mindful, because there's an intimacy, there's and there's a vulnerability, I think, that can get flagged up. So sometimes I think, isn't it about, I think that's what I love about the sitting with people, that it really, whatever sense of subtlety that I believe that I might have, I meet the limits of my subtlety, and it encourages me to settle in a little bit more, because, I think we all need to be mindful, or even our own time, isn't it? Like, we're sometimes, I think about me, who'd probably be, I'd consider myself more introvert. Yeah, my movement has needed to be towards community, towards people, because it's easy for me to be on my own, but that's different than being alone. And I think it's hard. I've often found it hard to find words for that, because the solitary part of me is very well in me. It's the other part. It's to move out into the world. And that's part of, I think, about even this week of, I noticed inside about the putting out of the, as we, released our first episode and so forth, even though we're recording a couple of, it was a positive.
Yes, congratulations, by the way, on the release of the first episode. I saw that the feedback was good.
Yeah.
And we welcome comments to encourage us to do more, or any questions that you have, or things you would like to hear about in the context of our conversation, of the contemplative life as the red thread.
Yeah. And, I'm wondering, maybe as we even move towards an end, Jake, whether, one of the things that we shared, and if people are interested, is that we'll spend actually a peak in experience online, but also in person, of a contemplative day, a desert day. Yeah. And if people are interested in that, that's great, because
let us know in the comments.
Yeah. For now, for me, thanks a lot, Jake. Thanks, listeners.
Thank you.
You have been listening to The Hinge, a podcast presented by Noel O'Driscoll and Jake Espin, produced by Jer Kellett. Feel free to contact the show in the comments or by emailing us at thehingepodcast@gmail.com. Join us next week for another episode of The Hinge.